A lot of the time when I make these reviews of adaptations, I have to preface them by explaining how I haven't actually engaged with the original work, so I'll be judging what I'm reviewing as its own product. In this case, with Wuthering Heights 2026, I don't have to do that. I have read the original Wuthering Heights story, and I adored it. The novel has a blisteringly cold vibe to it, and the cast is so well described and characterized. Nobody is quite perfect, and some are utterly detestable at points, but there are still moments where every person becomes sympathetic in some way. I love the complexity of the story. Every layer you think is the last has another hiding underneath, and there are many lenses to view the narrative through. Leading up to the release of the movie, there were worries, a few questionable casting choices, a soundtrack by a pop idol that seemed unlikely to fit, and a trailer that didn't exactly stun. Everybody was telling me it would be a disaster, but I was still interested to see how the story would be adapted, even if it fell flat on its face. It does seem like a difficult story to put to film, given how much shit goes on in the decades that the book covers. Unfortunately, this hope and this attachment only led me to hate the movie more. Spoilers will follow. Wuthering Heights 2026 chops giant sections of the original story off, which is, of course, not entirely an issue. Adaptations are known to change things, and if nothing was changed at all, frankly, that'd be a bit boring. A director's creative visions can only come to fruition if they take liberties. However, the pieces that have been removed are so massive that they subtract entire thematic choices and arcs from the narrative. First of all, the framing device used in the novel is gone completely. We do not see a future version of Wuthering Heights through the eyes of Lockwood, the new neighbor to its residents. Lockwood's removal isn't all that surprising, since he is basically just a stand-in for the reader and doesn't do much himself, but the complete subtraction of this future is quite disappointing. Seeing the wildly different version of the Heights in the future with an older, secretive Heathcliff and haunts around every corner keeps you wondering how on earth things could shift around so much. That is where the mystery comes into play, and without it, the story is brought back to basics. Even worse, Catherine Earnshaw, our lead, does not have a child in this iteration. Kathy, the daughter, takes up about half of the story, meaning that the entire section is shaved off, leaving us with 50% only. It is possible to adapt Wuthering Heights without the second part, because Catherine and Heathcliff's interactions make for a mostly full story, but again, you lose a lot. The concept of the generational curse and the eventual redemption when Kathy follows her genuine love instead of the wants of her guardians, the product of Heathcliff's abuse, his son Linton, and his realization of his evils on his deathbed. Given how much of this stuff is cut, it's shocking that the section in which we see Catherine and Heathcliff as children still feels very rushed and simplified, even though they gave themselves so much time for it. What the movie does isn't exactly changing, but removing and simplifying. So what do we have left? Well, quite a few characters still remain. An example of one that I don't really mind is that all of Hindley Earnshaw's characterization has simply been passed on to his dad. In the novel, Hindley is Catherine's brother who bullies and abuses Heathcliff while her father is mostly just a regular dude. In the movie, her brother is dead, as is made clear by a very awkward line early on, and her father abuses Heathcliff. I do prefer Hindley as the brother, since Heathcliff's rebuttals towards him show his competitive personality early in his life, but it doesn't ruin the character to make him the father instead, and he's one of the only people in the film who is appropriately creepy. My man looks like a goblin. Another fairly strong character is Nellie, played by Hong Chow. Her role from the book is decreased quite a bit, but she still has enough screen time to get her point across. I do wish she expressed further her distaste for Catherine, but she worked for me just fine. The failures in the supporting cast are the Lintons and Joseph. Joseph, in the text, is a religious zealot. Literally, all he does is scream about God, and everyone hates him. It's a little obnoxious. But he adds another layer to the story, a religious subtext. Here, Joseph surprisingly remains, but he is instead a normal-ass guy for most of the runtime, and then for a single scene, he's a BDSM sex freak. Seriously, what was the purpose of that scene? The Lintons are more aggravating, though. Since the youth section is rushed through, Catherine and Heathcliff don't meet the Lintons until their adulthood. This would have been another opportunity to show Heathcliff's competitiveness against the cowardly Edgar, but whatever. Instead, Edgar ends up being an exceedingly uncharacterized and regular husband for Catherine, and the sympathetic side to his personality is never explored. If anything, the story sides against him, even though all he wants is for his wife to not cheat on him. And Isabella. Don't get me started on Isabella. The film turns her into a bumbling, ditzy obsessor for both Catherine and Heathcliff to an uncomfortable degree. Heathcliff openly tells her he will be horrific towards her, and she goes with him anyways because he's just so dreamy. She is then objectified by him and treated like, and I'm not lying here, a dog collared in the corner until she has to be rescued by Nellie. Far be it for me to call a movie created by a woman sexist when I am a man, but in comparison to Isabella in the novel, this comes off as disgustingly exploitative. In the book, Isabella is led on by Heathcliff as he hides under a mask of kindness. Only when they enter a relationship does he become monstrous. She does not leave him because she is threatened and does not want to disturb Catherine and Edgar where they live. She strikes back at him constantly with insults of her own, and when he tries to attack her, she fights back. Eventually, she leaves Heathcliff of her own accord and denounces him as a devil that she may never speak the name of. This version strips away Isabella's intelligence and her free will, and all for some bizarre sexual fantasy of Emerald Fennels. This was the part that made me walk out, but I still believe that I can fairly judge the movie since it was like 95% over by that point. The film's main focus is Catherine and Heathcliff, not any of the rest of the characters, so let's go ahead and talk about them. I would say that for parts of the movie at least, they are the strongest aspect. Their bonding in the first half is basic, but not annoying. When Heathcliff returns from his journey abroad, the movie reaches its highest point. Jacob Elordi was a worrying casting choice, partially due to the race controversy that I won't touch on since I'm not familiar enough with it, and yet he really showed that he could have been a good Heathcliff during this section. He's brooding, off-putting, and reveling in his own rudeness. This is the only time that the film really lets him be the Machiavellian menace that Heathcliff is meant to be, but they retract that very quickly. Even though this movie is willing to engage with a villainous Heathcliff, it also wants to redeem him and portray him and Catherine as a twisted romance. This is a drastic misinterpretation of their relationship. Yes, they do love each other, especially as children, but after Catherine marries, her love for him mostly dissipates, and it becomes Heathcliff's sole goal to get his revenge on her. He literally parents her daughter specifically to get back at her for leaving him behind. The whole point of their relationship is that they can never be together, and it drives both of them to immorality. Emerald Fennels seems more concerned, though, with making Heathcliff out to be this demoralizing sex god who every woman fawns over as soon as they come in contact with him. He and Catherine aren't even really driven apart, because they still fuck for the entire back half of the movie. They do it a lot. It actually gets pretty boring. Their love for each other is still there. They are still able to have an affair, and the movie seems to side with or glorify them even throughout their most indefensible acts. The hate and bitterness of the original story is replaced with ignorance and surprisingly unsexy sex scenes. Why did they keep making Jacob Elordi lick people? He does it way too much. There is no revenge plot or fallout because all of the couple's differences are simplified down to that one scene from Shrek where Shrek thinks Fiona hates him. On Margot Robbie, I have nothing to say. Her performance is fine, equally serviceable and forgettable, probably because Emerald Fennel was using Catherine as a self-insert character. So there have to be some positives, right? I mean, the movie does look good. Some reviewers have gone so far to call this film's visuals gorgeous, incredible, and other compliments. And I wouldn't go that far. For one thing, the actual Wuthering Heights building is very underwhelming to look at. However, the interior design and the massive mountains do look great, and the constant fog, even though it might be a bit much, does resemble the vibe I was looking for in the adaptation. As well as that, the Charlie XCX soundtrack is a bit of a mixed bag. The pop aesthetic is really at odds with the tone of the film, but the songs themselves are kinda great. Specifically House, a single which was released beforehand, is show-stopping in its own right, and used well as an intro to the film. There's not much beyond that, though. As I mentioned, the performances are mostly good, just not super praiseworthy. The flaws overwhelm the strengths by a wide margin, and watching the narrative of Wuthering Heights be ripped to shreds with what seems to be little care for what it was maddening. An adaptation doesn't have to parallel the original exactly, but it should resemble it, and it does for a while, until it becomes more 50 Shades of Grey than Wuthering Heights, and all respect for the source material leaves out the back window. Emerald Fennel clearly showed her vision, and her vision was to create a fully new story dumbed down for fanfiction readers where only the characters' names remain the same. As an actual fan of Wuthering Heights, I give this a 2.5 out of 10. But for the movie's pacing, simplicity, and awkwardness, I feel like I can safely say I still wouldn't have enjoyed this even if I hadn't read the book. To put it bluntly, it is not a good film. Knowing what it was ruining only worsened things. Anyways, despite this being a frustrating watch, I'm excited for the next few videos. We're likely to be getting back into Invincible at the beginning of March, and I hope to see you then. Bye now.